Welcome to We Are the People with Mozilla. We're really excited to have an incredible panel to talk about the democratization of this incredible medium called virtual reality and all the other immersive media that it is leading us to as we move into this crazy future. I'd like to invite Reggie Watts, Chris Milk, Sean White, and Nonny de la Peña to the stage. All right, okay, so this is VR the People. So we are going to kind of get directly into talking with you all. Before I start thinking of some of the things, some of the themes, some of the questions that you have for this incredible group of artists and technologists. I'm gonna call on you in 1 second, but first, I'd just like to go along the line and have each of you guys tell me who you are and what was your origin story, what got you into virtual reality? Not that we don't maybe have already heard it, but we'd love to hear it again.
My name's Chris Milk, and I've been exploring storytelling in new technologies for about 8 or 9 years now. I started as a music video director. I was here at the New Frontiers. We just figured it out in 2011 was my first year here with the Johnny Cash project and the Arcade Fire Wilderness Downtown project. So been exploring the sort of intersection of storytelling and technology, and probably 4 or 5 years ago, I met Nonny, and she showed me her piece down at Mark Bolas's lab, and it was all the things that I had been sort of looking for in a developing medium, and kind of put all my attention and all my focus into that.
I have to say that I met you in 2011 in a cab ride up from Salt Lake City up to the Sundance Resort, and once I found out he had directed for Kanye West, I felt kind of intimidated to spend an hour and a half in the car with him. But once we got up to the lab and I started seeing the work that he had produced, that was incredibly resonant and emotional, and some of the most intellectually connection to interactivity and image and story. And I remember thinking, you were on the cutting edge of every single new technology that showed up in the kind of communication architecture that was quickly proliferating at that time. And I just always had imagined you'd be going to the next medium, the next medium, the next medium. And when you got to VR, and I remember having a conversation with you, and you just stopped and you said, I found it. And that was a pretty profound moment for me to say, okay, this is going to be something that nobody can ignore because of your voracious curiosity in technology. So to see you invest in the way you have in virtual reality really said a lot to us at Sundance about how incredible this medium is. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. Thanks.
So I'm Nonny de la Peña. I guess I've been doing VR about 10 years. Before that, I was a correspondent for Newsweek. I made documentary films, but was always exploring tech, teaching myself to code, teaching myself HTML, eventually teaching myself enough C# to build the first VR piece that premiered here in Sundance in January of 2012. And not long after is when I met Chris and a couple of other amazing people. And I was like, man, check this out. For storytelling. I had my first experience in a lab in Barcelona with Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez Vives, brilliant thinkers. And once they showed me a walk-around VR piece about bystanders, like you're watching this fight happening, and I remember the cable and it just pulling, like going, oh my God, trying to get in the middle of it. That's when I knew I couldn't ever build stories where I put you out there. I had to put you in here. Now I'm running Emblematic Group. I have an amazing team. I need to shout out to them. We put up this entire setup in about 26 minutes.
Woohoo!
And this setup is an unbelievable partnership with Mozilla where we are letting you be filmed and then dropped into volumetric virtual reality, walk around virtual reality, that using A-Frame, we've built code on top that lets you launch in the browser. So we are now at the point, we are here at Sundance, are launching the first time ever where you can walk around in virtual reality straight from the browser, from Firefox.
Woo! Let's give a round of applause for that. I can't wait to experience.
So please go back there and be filmed when you get a second after we're through with this or whatever. We'll get a few minutes. That just talking about, we're celebrating women in tech through this particular installation.
Okay, now I'm gonna tell a story about her too. So Nonny de la Peña was my mentor back in 2010 at the Bay Area Video Coalition, and she got up on stage and she was giving this incredible talk about the ways in which you were working in journalism in Second Life at that time. And I was just like kind of blown away with the idea that you could explore something as seemingly needing to be in kind of an explicit real capture on film and bring it into this immersive giving people agency within journalistic stories. And then when we brought her, when she came, we were both artists at 2012 exhibition, and it was like a 12-hour wait to come in to see this thing called Hunger in Los Angeles, and people were just coming out with just weeping. And it was amazing to watch the trajectory of that prototype of the Rift coming and watching your trajectory over the last, what has it been? Who can do the math? 5, 6 years? Less. Okay, I that's why I don't code. No, but the one thing that was really amazing to watch Nonny do in this space is, and I shared this with everybody on the phone and the setup for the panel. I don't know if anyone knows, but virtual reality has now got more women in it than any other sector of the tech industry. Do you guys know that? Yeah, I mean, it deserves a clap. And I did a lot of research over the last year asking about, on equality in emerging media. And when I went around to women like Gigi Pritzker and Jess Engel and all these women that have come into this field that are doing amazing things and being incredible leaders, all of them pointed back to, well, I just thought it was like a tech geek thing. I didn't think it was for me. It wasn't, I didn't think that was anything I'd be interested in. And then they said when they walked into the exhibition and saw Nonny de la Peña standing there and got to experience her piece, we realized, oh, this is a sandbox I can play in. So I do think that we should give a round of applause for a big reason why women are hoarding to this medium is because of your inspiration.
Thank you.
Who's over there? Who y'all over there?
Hi, my name is Keenan Feldspar. No, my name is Reggie Watts. Yeah, I've been a big fan. I'm just doing this because it's bright, but I'm not trying to look cool. Yeah, I've been involved in VR since its attempt in the mid '90s, Dactyl Nightmare and so forth. And ever since I was a little kid, I was just fascinated with the idea of some kind of a technology which believably transports you to another world. And since the advent of actually attainable experiences as of the last 10 years, that really inspired me to figure out a way to become involved in it. And I made a film 2 years ago that was here called Waves. That was really fun. It really was it was not dissimilar to making theater, experimental theater, really. So the chops were kind of there anyways, and it was very fast to make, which is how I like to make things, as fast as possible. And of course it took forever to finish it because of all this hand stitching going on, but now that's been solved with AI. But yeah, it was an amazing experience, and it gave me a moment of excitement as to what I could do more of in the future. And since then, I've just been avidly involved with doing some assets for Microsoft for their action grams and doing holographic stuff. I'm interested in volumetric capture and using that in really dumb ways, using overpowered means for really stupid ideas. And just kind of getting involved in the dialogue to kind of help steer, in my very small way, the creative possibilities of the technology without the technology being so much in the way. I'm just excited about that. I'm developing a game with Squanch Tendo or Squanch Games, which will be a first-person something. That'll be a really fun game. And yeah, I just love VR and MR and AR and GR.
And I have to say, you were the first you were the first artist to bring comedy into the space, especially in the New Frontier family, in a way that was just like, you set the standard. We were like, oh shit, someone did it. They figured out how to make us laugh in VR, and not because a lot of us were crying a lot in VR before. So we're happy to have you back in the family.
Yeah, we needed that laughter.
Right. My name is Sean White. As you know, I'm a snowboarder. I right now run a lot of our work in Mozilla in new technologies, so AR and VR and artificial intelligence and speech recognition and new programming languages. But I've spent a long time in virtual reality. I was mentioning earlier the very first project I worked on was about 25 years ago at the Banff Center for the Arts. And it was called the Placeholder Project. It was with Brenda Laurel and Rachel Strickland and Michael Neymark, people who were just doing completely cutting-edge work, seeing if it was possible. If you took $1 million and a reality engine and put it in one eye and another reality engine driving with $1 million in the other eye. But they were exploring some of the same things that we care about today, right? What does it mean when you embody as a character? What does it mean to the storytelling if you could move from place to place? How do you actually hold that in your head? Or if you change the voice of the first person character, does that change how you perceive the story? And that was 25 years ago. Today, I love all of the work that we have seen where people are taking some of the same kinds of tools and exploring it. What's exciting to me is that now those tools are available for almost anybody, right? That is, it doesn't require writing your own compiler and a couple $1 million to do this. We have programs all around the world in North Africa and India and Southern California, and a lot of the work often is just someone experimenting with something, a bit like GeoCities, right? It is giving people a voice to try out a new medium, and that's one of the reasons why I get so excited about both VR and the sort of early work in MR, where you are telling stories in the worlds around you.
And that's one of the reasons we were really excited to partner with Mozilla, because there's this spirit of democratizing the mediums, democratizing the tools, and lowering the barriers to access that we were passionate about. I think everyone on this stage is very passionate about. And that's why the title, VR the People. I can only imagine this being a 40-year-old medium and seeing it, and you having 25-year kind of deep history with it, seeing how incredibly frustrating it must have been to be one of the handful of people around the world that got this incredibly transformative experience, and you couldn't share it, because there just wasn't enough access. And so right now, I think of our generation in the kind of innovation cycle, and we're trying to desperately work with the engineers and the hardware companies and the technologists, and they're inventing technology in their creative labs, trying to share this thing that we're like passionate about. I can imagine having to wait 25 years for this point where we can really, really lower those barriers.
That people were continuing to make along the way. It just was installation art as opposed to something that you could share across the globe.
The mobile phone just kind of changed everything, because suddenly all the energy going into the phone screen allowed us to make goggles that were easier and better to make. And I know that I was 3D printing goggles in my mom's garage, so we could put up motion trackers and walk around. It was insane. Let me tell you what, I can't tell you how many times I had to fix things with a fucking paperclip. But because of that, and all the artists really wanted to use it, but now the two came together, and now to have somebody as a partner like Mozilla to really be working for everybody here, to have the tools and then allow us to code on top to make this a browser base, it's just, to me, it's like a dream come true.
All right, y'all. And this is VR the People, so we're not going to just be a bunch of talking heads up on stage. I want to start on this side in the front section. Somebody's got to give me one question. Yeah, you got one? Paisley is on the spot. Sorry. Anybody behind them have a question? Yes, please, Kira. Yeah, the proliferating words and definitions and taxonomy of immersive media. Chris, do you want to try to take that? Are you guys trying to figure out how to talk about this stuff within and Here Be Dragons?
I have no idea what they all are. I've lost track. I like WR for Watts R. Watts reality. I have no idea. I know what virtual reality is. I'm pretty confident I know what augmented reality is. Mixed reality, there's, as far as I can tell, 3 different definitions for it. And XR, I'm not sure.
And hyper reality's in there too now.
But Nonny can tell you.
I used to say, can we just say digital reality? But then now we're in DR, and so it's the doctor, right? I mean, it's the vernacular is just really, really rough. I mean, like 3D. So what's 3D? Well, 3D means all kinds of different things. It means those crazy-ass glasses in the movie theater. It means stereoscopic. When you're filming in 360, you can have 3D stereoscopic that's just film that you're filming. And then there's 3D, the kind of modeling with depth that we're using. So 3D is also a really, really tough thing. I can't wait till the language settles out. And maybe we need to just have a special on a mountain somewhere convening of like linguists who can come and work with us about what sticks and how should we shape this language.
And definitely a kind of a pitfall not to fall into, which Ingrid sitting right there and I have had to deal with for the last decade, is not to bastardize these things to the point that like transmedia makes everyone like throw up. You know, and there's so much more debate about what the word means than actually making the work and figuring it out. So I don't know. That's my little 2 cents. I'm a moderator. I shouldn't be giving my 2 cents.
No, but I think it's a big mess, right? I mean, a lot of this is pedantic. There are academic conferences where the people would publish about, you know, mixed reality as a spectrum a decade ago, and I think the important thing is what you're making. Are you making something that, you know, immerses you in another place? Are you making something that, you know, puts a documentary on the steps of the university? Are you making something that actually engages people? And so that hopefully the names fall out, but they follow the stuff that gets created.
I think like, immersive technology is pretty easy.
Yeah, I like that. Let's stick with that. Reggie Watts, everybody, has defined the medium. From this point on, that's the language we're using.
E.T.
Watts is immersive technology. Which
I like WR. He just, this is done. Okay, Paisley.
Uh-oh.
One of the things I noticed about all of you sitting up there is that you come from various industries and you've been able to draw them together, like journalism and virtual reality, or dance and VR, or music, or comedy, and academia, all these things. How are you bringing them? Do you think that that gives you a special ability to succeed in this industry where you really have to just be comfortable with chaos and like joining two different fields and learning those vocabularies? That do you understand what I'm getting at?
But, you know, remember, this is just it's like film. What can you do with film? So that's really the place where everything connects. And that is, you know, that's what VR, I mean, and AR has its own kind of way that you would utilize it. But VR to me is just like, what would you do with film? And so it means it could be any of those things.
But not, Nonny,
right.
what I mean is, why don't I just tell you what I think?
Paisley, I'd
Working hard on trying to make that a
Come
question.
sit in my lap, Paisley. Come sit in my lap.
I think that all of you have been so successful because you've been able to take your knowledge from these industries and bring it into this platform. And it's been your life vest because you've been uncomfortable and taken your knowledge to this new place. And it's given you the language to talk to all these different people. Like VR is all these different industries coming together. So you guys are at the top, right? You guys have succeeded. And it's because you have the ability to draw connection. And I think one way to really increase the access for other people is to teach people how to communicate across mediums and across different platforms. And I think each of you has been able to do that very successfully. So I guess it's not a question.
But I'm going to have a question that's based on that, unless someone wants to directly comment. But it's this idea, I mean, this is about democratizing this medium and really getting to a model where this is becoming a mass medium, right? So my question is, in your creative practice and in your creative technological engineering, what does it look like when you really are in an open source environment for VR? What does it mean when you have a direct relationship with your fans in this medium? What is that? What do you think that how is that new kind of level of innovation in the field? What is that going to do to the work that you're making? Do you have any vision for that yet? I'm looking at Reggie.
Oh,
Fans.
oh, yeah.
The person with fans.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, you know, it has to get to the point at which I can reply relatively quickly using the medium, and it's not quite there yet. I mean, there are obviously social platforms, you know, at least 3 of them that you can choose from, where you can just have an experience with them in that particular platform. But to be able to respond with my own customized response isn't quite there yet. As I'm not a coder, I need tools that enable me to kind of bypass the technical complexities of being able to express in the medium. But I think that that's definitely going to come, and I think that will actually accelerate many of the technologies at least the idea of what we want to live in much more quickly, because we'll learn a lot by just what people are asking and how the responses are. I guess the person asking and then a response. Yeah, that.
That was good.
Thanks.
That's hard.
I
but
tried.
Thank
I
you for
ended
that.
terribly. This was.
What about Nonny with I'd love to hear from you in terms of journalism, what you're seeing, especially this specific initiative that you're working on with Mozilla. How do you see it changing the kind of nature of journalism?
So, already I think that VR, because we did the initial pieces in journalism or nonfiction, I think that journalists have always tried to push the envelope, right? They basically are responsible for the NAGRA, which then got adopted. They were constantly trying to innovate the tools to be able to get out in the field and tell stories better and bring the stories home. So now with Mozilla, what we're going to do is we're going to be working with the Online News Association. We got a grant from the Knight Foundation, and we are going to work with journalists around the nation who are digitally interested. We're going to help scan environments that are locations with multiple stories, live in them. For example, the Tijuana border, the Supreme Court, anyway, important places all around the country. And then we'll let the journalists just embed their own stories in there and be able to launch on the browser, just providing the URLs. So already we're going to really bring this across the nation and start taking important stories. And I'm going to commission with Knight Foundation, Aspen Institute on Truth and Democracy, which we know that we're having some serious issues right now. So I think this is a really important moment that when we're talking about VR, that we're engaging with the people who are trying to tell real stories and let them help define truth in this medium.
Fantastic. I mean, definitely the journalistic. I actually interviewed The Guardian and the New York Times VR kind of teams and asked them, how are you, creating new ethical standards for journalism and this stuff? Because it's, very different. And they used the work that you did with them on the domestic abuse. Kia. And I mean, it was really rigorous. It was just as rigorous as I imagine any other journalistic process, but with
probably more.
But probably more.
In working with Frontline right now, I can guarantee you, the rigor in which these pieces are approached now for authenticity and accuracy is probably 1,000 times than a regular film. I even had Rainey Aronson, the head of executive producer of say, like, we're even going back now into our edit room and going, is that cut truthful? Because they've had to spend so much time with putting our VR pieces under the microscope that it's actually reflected back into their journalism in the room.
So Chris, you have been a pioneer of social VR. And last year with Life of Us was a huge landmark thing where all the isolationist kind of critique that was happening around VR started to melt away really quickly. And we knew it would get there, but to see it happen was quite exciting. So how do you see the practice of social VR and this idea of democratizing tools for more creative expression coming into the field? Like, what is your ambition with Within and Here Be Dragons?
In terms of social VR, it seemed like the inevitable next step was we had to. I mean, you have these digital devices and they're connected to a digital network, so eventually they're going to be interconnected, and you're going to have people in the same experience at the same time. What we weren't sure is, like, what does it mean to have a live person in a physical representation of a human that isn't to photorealistic qualities. And as soon as Aaron, my co-founder, was in San Francisco and I was in Los Angeles, and we got inside of this interconnected piece where he was a white box with two white box hands, and I was a white box head and two white box hands. And as soon as he picked up his headset and this box came up into the air, I immediately recognized it as him. And then when he talked, what was so interesting was once I recognized, like, the soul of this person inside of these three white floating boxes, my brain just clicked, and there was no translation or abstraction. It was just like, these floating boxes are now my friend Aaron, and that was a real revelation for us, because we realized that we had been really concentrating on photorealism and live action filmmaking in VR, and because we thought, like, that's where we could squeeze the most humanity out of the technology at that moment. But then as soon as we felt another person inside, it was like a fire hose of humanity, and it didn't matter what the person looked like. So Life of Us was really kind of an experiment of how far you could actually push that. It's like, okay, this seems to work, so let's see how far we can push it before we break it. Yeah. So we made you into 8 different characters, and you evolve through 1 billion years of evolution on Earth. And not only do you not look like yourself, but we also change your voice to match each character. So you have like a super high-pitched voice when you're a little single-celled amoeba, and you have like a big, deep, like Barry White voice when you're a pterodactyl. And it was fascinating because it worked. We didn't break it.
It worked. When I was a businessman in the future, I was like, I'm a businessman. I know I did this in Southwest. I did the exact same thing, but it was hilarious. I was like knocking monkeys off Ruthie's, my colleague's back, and it was on rails, and I love the pace of it. I love that you broke the rules around this kind of VR needs to orient. You need to take some time to orient yourself. You just like broke those rules, and we got to go on. It was a roller coaster, but it was a roller coaster with pure joy. It was with some kind of a meaning of the sense of your kind of how we are connected to this long trajectory of humanity and evolution and creation. But now you've got another piece here that's social. Now, what was the learning from Life of Us that you're now carrying into Chorus?
We built a lot of technology on Life of Us, and we wanted to try to enable other creators to work with the tech that we had built and build on top of it. So Tyler Hurd, who had Chocolate here last year, we have a relationship with him. He's awesome. And the guys in Justice, Xavier sent me this track that they were working on, and it sounded like if Ennio Morricone scored Flash Gordon. And it was just like this big epic sci-fi thing, like somehow from the 80s, and it was like the obvious person to create something for that was Tyler. So we pushed them, mashed them all together, and this amazing thing came out. But I think, like, from a philosophical standpoint, what's interesting to us is thinking about putting all the technology aside. It's really about the shared experience as the medium, as a canvas. And we as consumers of stories, if you will, interact with artistic mediums and have a shared experience in that we witness them. So we go to the movies together and we have a shared experience watching the movie, and we witness stories. And then we go out of the theater and we walk out into the real world and we live stories. And those shared experiences that we have in the outside world are actually more powerful stories for us because there are stories, but that's never been a medium that's authorable for creators and writers and directors. Our reach only extends to the theater door. As soon as you walk out of it, those stories are just happen. So what we're excited about is, what does it mean to take the relationship between two people, the shared experience between two people, and actually use that as the foundation of the storytelling medium.
Very exciting.
Who the heck would have known, putting those goggles on you, what would happen, Chris? In that lab, how many years ago? Oh my God, who would have known?
Yeah,
what would it be?
So I'm gonna switch gears and go to Sean. Hi, over there. You're engineering the tools that we, through Mozilla and in a very open source way, and you're kind of helping us to create a pathway forward on what is that next frontier. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we can expect in terms of the design for the open source, web-based volumetric capture VR? Like what are the tools that we should be starting to integrate into our practices?
Sure. So Chris actually, I think, was a great starting point for talking about that, right? There are these trajectories where you first ask, is something possible, right? Can we actually display, can we give someone a sense of haptics? Can we give someone a sense of smell? And then, can you now do it for 10 people or 15 people or do it at a festival? And then, can you actually start to bring that out to more people, and does it actually help in the storytelling? What does it mean if you feel someone hit you or touch you? What does it mean when you are sharing a space? You are in an UNESCO space and talking about that together. And so a lot of the things that we're working on are continuing that, and we're working with all the other companies that are doing that, all the other tool makers, all the other builders, so that those are accessible, right? So if someone is making something in A-frame and they realize they actually want a social experience, they don't necessarily have to hire a big programming team. They include a component, right? That kind of photogrammetry stuff that Nonny's been showing, right? It's great if you can get a grant and have, you know, some really sharp engineers and artists working on doing that. But if you can actually include a line of text or a line of code, and suddenly that lets you express that in the same way, that opens it up, and hopefully that opens up more storytelling, more people being able to do that. So those are the kinds of things that we work on, the social aspects of it, the different tools for creating spaces. I've noticed, you know, we've worked with some of the most interesting spatial storytellers are actually architects, right? They think about the ways that the space gets created and how people move through those spaces and how groups of people move through those spaces. And so I think we're learning a lot from them, and maybe this is to the point you're asking about the open side of it, people can build their own tools and share it, right? So I think Chris is probably an exception in some ways. Oftentimes people will figure out how to create something and then it doesn't actually get shared. But in these environments, you know, someone says, oh, I actually want to make physics so that as I'm telling the story, it feels like you are on Mars, or as I'm telling the story, it feels like you're in Narnia. And then someone else can share that and do that in the next iteration, the next instantiation of it. So those are the kinds of things that we think about. And I have to say, it's not just us, it's everybody who's in the open community, in the web community, working on it.
And can you tell us a little bit about how we had a conversation pre-panel, and I always do this. I like leave the best part of the conversation in the the pre-panel conversation. So I'm hoping to bring a little bit of that in terms of we learned a lot from Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 in terms of we had this incredible excitement. I don't know how many of you guys were involved in that first initial, like, oh my God, knowledge is democratized, you know, everybody can start their own website. And it was just like this incredible explosion of creativity and entrepreneurship and connection, and it was all open. And it was frustrating because for some of the, you know, people trying to make revenue on that, there was really hard to find. It was all about open source. And then slowly as more and more billions of people started or millions of people started joining the platforms, we had to create these tools with which to kind of navigate through these massive amounts of data. And now we're on the other side of those tools kind of having gone too far in terms of creating filter bubbles and echo chambers and kind of narrowing everybody's worldview, which was absolutely the opposite intention of, like, you know, Sir Tim Berners-Lee when he decided not to make this his own, you know, patent, you know, trademarked IP-owned, you know, World Wide Web and HTML. So how do we engineer so that this new kind of open sourced immersive environment, which is even more powerful because it's hacking right into our brains and it's completely, we remember it like memory and not like something that's outside of us. How do we design for that ethical issue?
So I think you're exactly right, and part of that is experimenting and knowing that these things happen, and having positive actors in the space, right, who can actually design to it, who can engineer to it. So I'll give you an example. We have a small team who's been working on some of the ways in which you can have open social experiences, right? That is, you know, a line that lets you now share a VR space or a web space, and I get to control my avatar. I get to control how I show up or how I sound in dialogue with the person who's creating it, the artist. And we're encouraging them to get this out and start it. And one of the things that they had learned, because this was a team that had some pretty deep experience from places like AltSpace, was that they weren't just going to make something that let you talk to each other, because very quickly you start to see some of the behaviors as soon as it is open that I think most of us wouldn't like to see. Invasion of space, someone touching somebody that doesn't want to be touched, interacting in ways that you don't want to interact. And so they refuse to actually release any of this until they've gotten up to that next bar. And I'm sure there will be more that they have to do. But a lot of it is, again, that experimentation and having groups, organizations, people who care about it, who are those positive actors.
Okay, one last question for Reggie, then I'm going to open it up. you're a musician as well as a comedian. I heard you guys, and you're also a musician, Sean, and you make music in moving image. How do you see the future of music in this kind of, VR, the people, this open sourced world? I mean, do you feel like people will be doing jam sessions on the regular? Do you feel like, how do you feel music will play a part going forward?
Well, first of all, we gotta fix the problem of high quality audio.
Yes, who's gonna do that? Any
right
raising
now
hands? We got some engineers in the house.
It's just
Mozilla.
like you're like, what? Totally. But yeah, when we have more control over audio and we figure out some kind of a codec and a way to just kind of transmit higher quality audio. Still, even our cell phones sound terrible on our calls. But I think with the internet, we could probably open that up a little bit. Once that's solved, and then you have latency issues if you're talking about jamming with people, there have been many programs that a few different people try to tackle latency and so forth. But getting rid of all of that and saying that would be solved, yeah, I think that there will be an opportunity to play music with people as long as with those things out of the way, it's more possible. Otherwise, you just have to pretend like you're in the future, and you're like, no, this is really fun, but you're kind of pretending because in music, you're almost, especially when you're improvising, you're essentially creating a buffer that doesn't exist yet. So you're already generating ideas that haven't been played or experienced yet. As those ideas are forming, then you kind of crystallize them, and in the moment, so what's being experienced is actually in the past. So I think with
Damn, that's deep. Did y'all get that? Did you hear what he just said? That's why I can't rap. I tried. I was not a good rapper because I can't be in the past while I'm in the present.
Were you doing it right now?
Oh, damn. Yeah,
that's what a conversation is. It's no different. And when people are like, how do you do it? It's like, well, how when you're talking to your friend and you're like, yeah, I went to New York that one time. Oh my God, that reminds me of a story. It's the exact same process, but it's just using a different language. But I think in VR, we get an opportunity to be able to create things. For me, I don't like creating things. Well, not that I don't like, but I tend to like to use what I've created. So the good thing about having a digital platform is that it can be preserved, and it can be preserved whatever the method of recording is, whether it's just audio, whether it's volumetric or whatever it is. You can use all of that data, and then that can be shared, so it can just be iteration on iteration on iteration. Remix culture is going to happen much more readily because architectural artists will create environments for that to happen, and people will animate various scenes to it. It'll just get used and used. Mindshow is an example of where that's kind of headed, and that it just works intuitively. People get it right away, and they're like, oh, I can add to this and I can add to this, and it's democracy in action through creativity. I think music, again, once we figure out the audio quality aspect, because I know even in alt space, as an example, I was like, wanted to do DJ sets or performance sets, and I was like, could we just lock off? No positional audio. I just want left and right, like as if people are wearing headphones, and they're like, oh man. We're going to have to work on it. I'm like, really? That's more difficult than positional audio? That's so crazy. But these types of things are just basically, just simplifying things. And instead of going into the whiz-bang, music especially is very basic. You just need a stereo field. You don't need positional audio. I want to feel the intent of the performance rather than, oh, now I'm too far away. It sounds like a speaker that's 30 feet away. Like, I don't need that. I just need the direct input. So, anyway.
Well, you had to deal with that with the Beck concert, the first VR piece you did, dealing with music in this 360 environment before it was even ported into VR. What is your thinking about solving some of the issues that Reggie was talking about?
That one just came out of necessity because we had 200 individual musicians and we were trying to give you these different perspectives, and the whole concert was created so that it was a changing directional landscape of instruments that all coalesced into this one David Bowie song. So it came out of necessity, but there's better ways to actually record each one of them individually and then place them digitally, probably. The early experiments in audio were more just sort of technical, trying to find technical solutions. Personally, the thing that I'm interested in is in terms of music and sound in VR, is I've always thought that music was the most immersive art form that we've ever created. and I sort of took this weird path in my life that I started in music and was a musician in high school and college, and then was thinking, but also making films at the same time, and then thinking that if I put them together, I would, by being a music video director, I would somehow be able to make something that was more powerful than each of them individually, and became a music video director and realized that I was wrong. And so that was really a turning point for me, because what I found was that putting my prescribed images onto a song, in some ways I felt did a disservice to it, because it no longer allowed it to have the life that music has, that it can intertwine with your life, and it becomes tied to these memories and these moments in your life, and so much so that if you hear the song, you're instantly transported back, 10 years or 20 years to that moment in time, whereas that does not happen when you see a film from that moment or a music video from that moment. It's just the raw music that does that. So it is so because it's so immersive and it touches so deep in your memory. And all of the explorations that I started doing after I kind of like abandoned traditional music videos and started making interactive music videos and installation music videos and then just weird music projects, was trying to find some formulation that resonated in the same, like as powerful to me as just the raw music. And I didn't really find that until I found virtual reality, and I think there's a real deep connection between the two, because virtual reality has it is like raw music, only there's instead of it being like there was 15 years ago you were sitting on the beach that one summer with that one girl and the boombox was playing this one song, and the art of that is the song that's coming through, but the moment is created out of fate, right? Virtual reality is like the next step that allows you both to create the song and actually create the moment. So that's what is really fascinating to me, and that's why there's also a lot of music in all of the stuff that we do. This was Justice and the thing that's here. Pharrell did the track for Life of Us last year, and I think there's a real synergy between the two of them.
Yeah, I was just going to say, audio-wise is really interesting when you're talking about spatial versus stereo and how you do things. I was lucky enough to work with Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu on Carne de Arena, and there was discussions about, wow, well, the audio should be spatial, but then stuff's happening over there and nobody can hear it, right? And so as part of artists who are making content, the idea of thinking about in VR that, in film, it's okay if we see some figure crossing across the street with like their hand to their head and we can hear their voice right here in front. There's no reason we shouldn't be thinking about sound in the same way. That sound is in your toolbox as well, and sound, you can paint an area right next to the viewer, you can paint it in the back, and it depends how you want them to hear. And that's I think also part of the considerations when you think about creatively what you want people to feel when they come in these spaces.
And you guys know that the piece that she just mentioned got the first Oscar in VR. So I think that's really exciting to see how you were a huge influence on getting us to that level of acceptance. I remember I met with some members of the Academy a year ago, and they were like, "This is I shouldn't say this on a panel," but they were like, "I think." They're like, we're kind of dinosaurs. And they were like, there was just this like, it's going to be years before we're going to be seeing categories of, virtual reality in the Oscars. And obviously, the Emmys was already ahead of us, and we've seen a couple of Emmys come through. But this year, when we saw Alejandro Iñárritu receive the Oscar for the project that he worked on with Nonny and ILM X Lab, that was a real turning point for the industry. So congratulations on that. All right, over here, yes, right there.
So, at Cannes, that was the hottest ticket. Carne Arena, nobody could see it. Then we had to wait months to see it at LACMA. When he received the governor's award, he said you were the godmother of VR, and so. What was a collaboration like? What was, because it was a
Alejandro's
photogram?
a genius, right? Please.
No, but
Seriously.
But in terms of, because a lot of us do 360 video, but a lot of us, the photogrammetry, all that other stuff is still not that available. And so
But that's what we're trying to change. That's one of
Right.
the things we're launching today.
That's-
Right now,
that's
we're working on that very, very carefully. Not carefully, quickly. We've already, in a few weeks, been able to make it. Some of this process is now like 3 clicks. I think you'll find it pretty astonishing what you're going to be able to do with this stuff we've been building off A-frame. But yes, Alejandro wanted to be volumetric and walk around. But I have to say, I've met with many directors over the years, and they'll go like, yeah, and then I want a close-up here. And I'd have to go, no close-ups. Like, because the artist, whoever the viewer is, can walk around and they can be looking over there. Like, your close-up just doesn't work that way. But Alejandro, from the very first moment that we sat down to start talking about ideas, he completely understood the spatial nature of storytelling. So really him and Chivo, this is their incredible achievement with all the ILM, and it's a fantastic piece. But the idea that, I even in the discussions recently, like, oh, it's really hard, the one at a time thing, but the fact that we're starting to see ability to distribute this to the web really makes the ability for distribution for full walk around, I cannot emphasize enough how that's going to help our distribution issues, so that, like, you're always going to have hot tickets for sure to amazing projects that are going to be limited. But in general, this idea that it's one person at a time in goggles, who can only go to a place to see it, we're seeing that maybe we're able to democratize that by building on A-frame. So it's super exciting.
With that, I sadly have to say that we're out of time, but this is why we're also here, because Nonny has this incredible setup here for you to experience, to go into the volume and to be placed into Mother Nature. Okay, one. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have said what Mother Nature is. So, as you know, there's been some commentary that's been out there, including some lawsuits claiming that women are biologically predisposed not to be able to do tech things. And that's why they're not hired in companies like Google, because they just can't do it. And so we're kind of writing we're doing a letter to individuals who say stuff like that, and we're celebrating women in tech. So if you know a woman who's done something amazing in tech, or you yourself have done something you'd like to talk about, we're now shooting you in green screens here, and within a couple of minutes we'll pull you from that green screen and we'll drop you into a volumetric environment that you can walk around. And you get to pick from 5 nature environments, beautiful nature environments you can walk around. And this is just a couple of clicks because of the A-frame tech that we've done with Mozilla. And so if you want to be filmed, this is your moment. If you want to answer, rebuke those kind of ideas and statements. We will then publish the whole thing on the web so people can look at it in the web, and this will be a growing commentary that's intended to upend those concepts.
All right. Let's give a round of applause to Sean White, Reggie Watts, Nonny de la Peña, and Chris Milk. Thank you all for being here. Let's go get captured.